Well, hey there, everyone. This is Dave Dubeau with another episode of the Property Profits Real Estate Podcast. Today's episode is all about self-storage facilities, self-storage investing. My special guest is Kris Benson, calling in all the way from Georgia. How are you doing today, Kris?
I'm doing great, Dave. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Awesome. I'm doing great, So first of all, for folks that aren't familiar with self-storage as an investment class, why are you so enthusiastic about it? Why do you think this is such a good place to invest when it comes to the real estate space?
Well, I think it's interesting. I'm a data guy, Dave, right? So I try to make most of my decisions rooted in data. And so what's interesting with self-storage, and I can give you the link to this data set, but the National Association of REITs tracks all of the publicly traded REITs across all the subsectors. And if you look at the historical performance of self-storage comparatively to, call it the four major food groups, multifamily, office, retail, industrial, self-storage has outperformed all of them in the last 25 years. They've done just under 17% as a REIT, where apartments have been closer to 13, retail and office were in that general vicinity too. So everything's performed well, but historically the performance has been great. The second thing that I always look for, I'm a big believer that things that are going to happen have already happened. You just have to look in the past to find them. And so, the next recession, and we're recording this in May in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic. And so we're kind of in the midst of, we'll see what happens, but self-storage has performed really well in economic downturns. So in 2007, 8, and 9, that same data set, storage lost less than 4% of its value. Apartments was closer to 7, retail and office were in the double digits. S&P 500, just for example, was down 21%. So, it had that downside protection as well as the upside. And then the third reason, and this is kind of how I got too reliant, and the reason I like it most is the ownership is very fragmented in the asset class. So, the REITs own 20-25% of the market, and the rest of it, at least in the United States, is very fragmented as far as the types of owners. And there's still a lot of mom and pops. So people who own 1 or 2 facilities. So it gives a tremendous consolidation opportunity that exists to buy up a portfolio and potentially roll that up.
All right. Well, that makes sense. So it sounds like you're a person that focuses a lot on history. Like you mentioned, whatever's going to happen probably already has happened in the past.
Sure.
Can you give us a little bit of a backstory about, if you know, how self-storage began in the first place? Because I've looked into self-storage a fair bit, but I don't remember how it actually got started. Do you know?
So I don't know the actual origin story, and I'm going off memory. So if someone Googles this later and says, wow, Kris is full of crap, just ignore what I'm about to say. But I believe the origin story is there was a guy in Texas who opened the first facility in maybe the 50s and 60s and did it for military people. Okay. So when they got shipped out, he was giving them opportunities to put their stuff somewhere that was safe and secure. And then when they came back, they could get it out. Public Storage, which is the nation's largest self-storage REIT, was really the first group to kind of institutionalize it. And it went through a number of iterations to where it is now. They own 2,500 stores or something across the world. But when you think about storage inherently, it's a garage, right? People love stuff, and they may not necessarily have the room to keep it. And so, the problem that self-storage is essentially solving is giving you space and allowing you to organize. And really, our business has been built around change, right? So demand for self-storage comes from there's a 4 Ds: death, divorce, dislocation, and what's the 4th D? But you get the idea. You have change in your life, and you most likely need some sort of storage capacity. And so it's grown over the years, Dave. When I first thought about self-storage, I thought about this storage facility out in somewhere rural behind some guy's house in a gravel pad. And you go inside the house and you meet a guy with spaghetti stains on his t-shirt, and, he rents a unit behind his house. And, it's come from
there
that.
There are a few of those still around, aren't there?
There still very much are. And some of them are some of the best opportunities from an investment side of things. But, that's come to kind of second generation storage where, we're building facilities on the corner of Main and Main in the top 50 MSAs of the country. And it's all glass and brick, and the retail office rivals any Starbucks that you may walk into. So it's come a long way, and it's quote unquote been institutionalized. I think in the last 10 years, it's come with much more favor than maybe it had in the past.
Yeah, it's getting a little sexier these days, huh? So, Kris, what kind of facilities do you and your company focus on, and what geographical areas?
So we're a vertically integrated storage operator. So we're buying and managing the properties that we own. Typically, we're in kind of secondary, tertiary markets across the southeastern United States. Right now, we have 44 properties in our portfolio, spread across 8 states. We're primarily focused on value-add type deals. And value-add, maybe different than a little bit than apartments or residential housing. We're not putting.
What does that look like in self-storage?
If I told you we were putting granite countertops and hardwood floors in our storage units, that you wouldn't buy into that, huh?
I hope not.
But it can be a little bit of anything. I think how we look at it is we look at the lens of value add, or through the lens of how we're going to exit. So when we look at a value add property, we're ostensibly saying, what do we need to do to this asset to allow it to be attractive to an institutional type investor? And that could be, a REIT. One of the REITs could come buy the facility, or institutional money, think pension fund, insurance companies, those types of sources who want to come and deploy capital in the space. And so sometimes value add is expansion. We may have acreage that's being underutilized, and we feel like the market could support another 10 to 15,000 of square feet of storage. Sometimes that value add is an operational play, where, as you mentioned, the guy with the spaghetti stained t-shirt, they're not raising rents. They don't have any ancillary income items. Storage is like an operational business with a real estate play on the side. So, you can add things to the pro forma, things like U-Haul truck rental, tenant insurance, retail. We're selling locks and boxes and those types of things that help buoy the incomes going along with the pro forma. So it's one of those businesses that's constantly changing, and ultimately for us, value add has been where we've found the most value.
That makes sense. So you guys are really looking for value, looking to buy the property right and increase the value of it by making it more profitable. Basically, that's the bottom line, right? And then trying. So typically, you guys have how many properties in your portfolio? 45 right now? 44?
Yeah, 44 that we own, and then I think we have 4 that we're third party managing.
All right. And are you planning eventually to sell the whole kit and caboodle in one fell swoop, or you sell off the assets as you've increased the value?
I would say that we're kind of opportunistic in that regard. We just sold at the beginning of March a 14 property portfolio to one of the publicly traded REITs. There's certainly some additional value you're going to get, at least right now in the market, for a portfolio level sale. As you kind of get into the bigger numbers, there's more value to large institutional capital, the bigger the portfolio can be. So, I would say that we're opportunistic, and we look, if we can maximize the value of the property by an individual sale, we'll do that. If we can bundle a couple together, a lot of it, Dave, is geographic as well, right? If you're looking for someone to purchase a bundle of assets, they want to be able to say, okay, this makes sense for us geographically to come into these 3 states or this 3-hour radius. So I think we look at it with a little bit of a lens a little bit different in each situation.
So Kris, yourself personally, how did you get hooked on the whole self-storage space in the first place? How did that come to be?
Well, so as a real estate investor, I kind of got into real estate. My background in college, or right after college, was in sales. And when I turned about 30, I realized that I probably couldn't do that another 30 years. I was making a bunch of money and job was great, but my lifestyle was awful. I worked a lot. So it was for me about, building freedom and, being able to control my time, and real estate made sense, just as far as being able to create passive income. So I started in residential. We owned some duplexes. very quickly I realized I hated that, and it wasn't going to be scalable for us. There was a quote that I
don't
heard.
like dealing with tenants and toilets.
Yeah, it was. There was a quote that I heard that really kind of solidified for me, which was, big deals and small deals are the same amount of work. You just make less money on small deals. And so we got into commercial multifamily. It's a longer story than we probably have time for, but we ended up developing a 64-unit apartment complex. And that's kind of where the bells went off, where I said, oh, this is how you scale in real estate. And so we invested in multifamily for quite a few years. And then, as you probably know, cap rates have compressed in multifamily. It's become very, very competitive and tough to find value. We'll see how COVID affects us now. But, so I started looking at other asset classes, and the data that we started with, those 3 reasons were really how I made the transition to self-storage. And first, I was a passive investor, actually with Reliant. I went out and talked to a whole bunch of different self-storage operators. I like the guys here at Reliant. And after a couple of years, they needed some help raising equity and building out their investment platform, which I had some experience with. And so that's how we joined the company. So, in the last 5 years, we've done just over $650 million in transactions, buying and selling. So we've had a lot of velocity in the space, and we're curious to see kind of how the next 90 days go with what's going on with COVID.
Well, that's a good question. How do you think, because you touched on a big point, the demand for self-storage is based on the fact that we as North Americans buy a lot of shit. I mean, that we just clutter up our lives and we run out of places to put it. And our own garage, I mean, you look around any neighborhood, most of the cars are parked outside because the garages are full of crap. The stuff that doesn't fit in our own garage, we have to go put in self-storage. If the economy really constricts and we can't buy as much crap as we normally buy, how do you see that affecting self-storage?
Well, again, I can give you my gut, right?
Yeah, that's all I can ask you for sure.
I mean, I think the data suggests that in 2007, 8, 9, right, the last financial impact, storage did really well, right? Because people were downsizing, people were moving, that change was creating demand for storage. With this particular impact, so far so good. It's May 21st. And we've seen very minimal impact on revenues and collections, and even delinquency. I was talking to our director of operations this morning, and he has fielded about 40 calls of people who are saying, "Hey, I need some sort of break." And we have 44 properties and just over 30,000 units, so it's a pretty small percentage.
It's minuscule.
But I would say, Dave, that I think it depends how long everything stays locked down, right? As I think we're all kind of holding our breath to say, hey, as the economy opens back up, are people able to generate income? Because if this goes through the summer where, incomes are being constricted, then I think it's not going to matter what asset class we're all in. There's going to be some catastrophic effects to that for sure. And so, from my perspective, I believe that storage is somewhat insulated because it's a small percentage of your monthly income. And you're collateralized by your stuff. Most people don't want to get rid of it, right? I'm sure your listeners
we're addicted to that stuff. So quick question for you.
Sure.
So if somebody stops paying their rent for their self-storage facility, how long is it before you guys can put the locker up for auction?
It's state by state dependent. So the rules, I mean, sometimes some states it's as short as 15 to 45 days. Wow. Sometimes it's 60 to 80. It really is state by state and what those tenant rules are. The auctions for us, and I know there's, at least in the US, there's a TV show called Storage Wars.
Yeah, there's a Canadian version too. So
so it's a big, it looks sexy, but it's a huge pain in the butt for us. We don't make any money off of it. Even if we sold a unit for $1 million, they pay us the late fees and past due rent, and that's it. And then the rest of the money.
The auction company keeps all the money.
No, actually, the tenant is supposed to get all the money. Really? So the auction company makes a percentage on what they sell it for, pays their fees, it pays us our fees, and then the money goes to the state, and the state tries to track those people down.
The state supposedly gives it to the tenant.
theoretically.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting. I thought it, just out of ignorance, I thought it went to the storage company. I thought, hey, well, that's
Yeah, we'd be auctioning everybody's goods off then.
yeah, you'd be encouraging people to default. All right, well, that makes sense. Kris, very, very cool. Thank you very much for sharing some insights about the self-storage business. If people want to reach out, they want to find out more about you and Reliant, what should they do?
Sure. So for the Reliant side, if you're interested in our platform, potential investments with us, they can go to reliantinvestments.com. There's a bunch of free education on there as well, some videos in regards to what you should know as far as commercial real estate investing. And then if you're trying to connect with me personally on LinkedIn, we're pretty active. We do a fair amount of posting there. And my name's spelled with a K, so it's K-R-I-S. But if you search that and Reliant, I'm sure you'll be able to find me.
Awesome. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge.
Yeah, my pleasure, Dave. Stay safe.
You too, my friend. All right, everybody, take care. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you on the next episode. Well, thanks very much for checking out the Property Profits podcast. If you like what we're doing here, please head on over to iTunes, subscribe, rate us, and leave us a review. Be very, very much appreciated. And if you're looking to create a regular flow of inbound investor inquiries about your real estate deals, then I invite you to attend one of my upcoming live online demonstrations. And you can check that out at investorattractiondemo.com. Take care.